joining us to do this week's part of our Alpha Marriage course from Alpha Ireland is Alan Morris. Alan, you're very welcome to be back with us today.
Thank you very much, Anna. Thanks. Great to be here.
Now, Alan, for those who may be just catching up, do you want to just go over the last couple of series and what we've covered in regards to this marriage course to date?
Yeah. We started off with building strong foundations. Mm-hmm. In other words, making marriage time a weekly priority in our diaries. We prioritize a lot of things. We put in all our appointments for work, or we do with the children and all the kind of dynamics that are going on in our lives. But sometimes we have to actually put in our diaries our marriage time to grow and be stronger together.
Yeah.
And then we need to discover and seek to meet our partner's needs. Seek to meet each other's needs. Knowing me and knowing you, knowing each other. We talked about going over the bridge and trying to understand each other before. So that's building strong foundations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we did.
Then we talked on the art of communication. Talk about our feelings and where our partner is this week. Where are we this week? How are we feeling? And what's been going on in our lives? And listening to each other. Mm-hmm. And, talking about it and not interrupting or criticizing or offering advice, but just listening and asking them, is there any more to this? Is there any more that you want to say to me about that? So the art of communication. Mm-hmm. Then resolving conflict. Remember we had that argument on the radio?
Oh, we did?
Anna, yeah.
My friends are very worried.
But resolving conflict. Remember I've said that conflict is an opportunity of growth. Conflict is normal, and we have to look on conflict in a different way.
Yeah.
And maybe expressing our appreciation for our partners every day. Look on the positives, express our appreciation. Remember, appreciation is a big, important word. Mm-hmm. And when we disagree, discuss the issue rather than the person, rather than attacking the person. Remember, we talked about taking the issue out and both of you looking at out there, standing shoulder to shoulder beside each other, rather than having the actual disagreement between the two of you.
Yeah.
So shifting it out there, and together we're going to sort it out.
Yeah, great advice. Remember,
so don't get into the blame game, finding the bad man or the bad woman in this scenario. Mm-hmm. Make it the issue rather than the person.
Yeah. And
then just plan to spend a few minutes each day praying with each other. We talked about that. It's lovely when you can pray together and be stronger. And that you also talked about the three in one, God in the center of it. Mm-hmm. And that's so important. And then the power of forgiveness, the way you forgave me for having that argument on the radio, and I forgave you as well. The power of forgiveness, keeping the drains clear of unresolved hurts and angers, identifying them, the hurts, apologizing, and then forgiving. Yeah. That's kind of moving it forward in that.
And this week, of course, Alan, we're going to tackle the big topic of family, the impact of family, past and present.
Yeah, we could choose our phrase, but we inherit our relations, don't we?
We do, yeah.
We all our family dynamics are, it can be difficult. And also when you get married and the two of you are together, a lot of times you kind of think my husband or wife is going to be a little bit like what my parents were like. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then we suddenly realize they're not like that. They don't do the same things that my parents did. They have strengths and they have weaknesses. They have areas that they're good at and areas that they're bad at. My wife's father used to clean the car on Saturdays, and I always have the car immaculate on Saturdays. And that wasn't one of my strengths, So her expectation was that maybe I was going to always have the car immaculate.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So maybe that wasn't something that was my passion, or one thing that I found was important, Maybe other things were important to me. And so we're all different. What about you? What about your parents? How are they different to your husband?
Oh, well, I suppose definitely I think we're talking, for a husband to be more like the mother and the wife, and for a wife I think it's more like the father and the husband, comparisons. And I think, you're right, we can see something in our future husband that reminds us a little bit of our dad in some ways, things that we might have admired. And I think, for me, and I remember I said this to my husband a couple of years ago, and I suppose just for me, just to paint the picture, both my parents died when I was 15, so
Okay.
it was quite a young age to have the impact, but I did have the impact that my father was always somebody who, if he wanted to get things done or if something needed to be done, he'd just do it. You know, that was it. It would get done. And I saw that also in my husband, and I think that was one of the things that maybe attracted me, that he was one of these type of personalities that if something needed to be done and there was nobody else there to do it, he'd just do it, and that was it. But then, having said that, they are very different in so many other ways, you know, because you do only see the things that you admire, I think, in the early days, and then you kind of get to grips with all the rest of it and the stuff that he's brought from his family.
Yeah, sometimes those things that we think are strengths can turn into kind of the negative things that we first of all, it was what drew us to the person. Maybe this person was flamboyant and he was very bubbly, and maybe our father was maybe more consistent and maybe kind of a bit more stoic. And then after a period of time, the flamboyancy and things like that kind of rubs off on the uncertainty and the unknown and all that sort of thing like this. And we want the consistency of a stoic, consistent fatherly figure, you know, and sometimes they can change.
Yeah.
And so anyway, but then there's different stages of growing up.
There is.
There's the early years, like our parents' role. You know, what did our parents do to us? You know, to when we were young, our parents' role was to meet our physical, emotional needs, to set appropriate boundaries, to show unconditional love, not conditional love, unconditional love, and to provide a role model of a good marriage. That sometimes is not as good as we'd like because they're imperfect, but that was what they were trying to provide. So they're kind of, if you like, our parents are either side of us, holding us and bringing us through and really doing everything for us pretty well. Then the next stage then is the teenage years. And the parenting role is to give increased independence to us, to continue to meet our physical and emotional needs and set boundaries, to show unconditional love again, and to teach us to consider their needs and to start to give something back. So this is a time when maybe the teenager needs to kind of give something back to the parents a little bit, you know, and not just about taking all the time.
Yeah.
And then we've got then the coming of age, maybe the leaving of home. And what is the parents' role in this? Is to give support and advice, you know, and that's, rather than telling them what to do, is to just kind of give them advice.
Yeah.
You know, the parents may still have to kind of give comfort, money, and you know, clean the laundry or things like that. But it's more giving advice and to allow independence and encourage it to make their own decisions. You know, we're really we're really helping them to float on their own. You know, and to be totally dependent on us is not healthy. So we're actually kind of allowing them to be more independent and saying, yeah, go for it. You know, go on. I think that's a lovely word when a parent says, yeah, go for it. I believe in you, go for it. You know, so, you know, encouraging them to make their own decisions. And then to make the transition to an adult relationship then. And that's the thing. And then getting married.
Yeah.
As a married couple, the independence must be complete. Leaving and cleaving, you know. Sometimes a hard thing for parents to let go of their child when they're getting married. But they are creating a new center of gravity as a couple there. They're establishing their own home as a new decision-making structure. It's their decisions. They make their own decisions now.
Yeah.
And parents must say, yeah, that's their decision, and may not agree with them on it, but it is their decisions. And sometimes parents can add pressure by saying, oh, that's not the way I would have done it, you know. But it is their decision-making things. You can offer advice, but don't kind of put more pressure on them by doing that. You be careful that they have to make their own mistakes.
Yeah.
And then they have to seek to meet each other's needs, not your needs as a parent, but as their own needs. And then develop a relation of mutual support with parents and parents-in-law. You know, it is important. Like, you don't want to cut the divide. You don't want to kind of be totally away from your parents or your children. You want to still have that connection, but a healthy connection. So it's important to put in those boundaries that are healthy. You know, not to just cut yourselves off from each other, but to have healthy boundaries so that you can have a healthy relationship together.
Yeah. And couples can run into problems, can't they, Alan, if both sets of parents, or even just one set of parents, just continually tries to get involved in their lives and in their decision making.
You know, when a couple who have just newlywed make a mistake, what should a parent do? Should they rush in and try and fix them? And, you know, as loved ones, we want to rush in and, oh, my little baby, I want to help you and support you and things like that. But sometimes that isn't the right, healthy thing to do. Sometimes it is better that they try to work it out themselves and you help them, but don't fix them. Strengths can turn into weaknesses. I've seen in marriages where the parents were really good, really organized, really switched on about things, you know, and therefore one of the children, if they like the child of that family, went back to that other family, to her parents, and then it became that there was 3 in the marriage, you know, 3 or 4 in the marriage, and then that marriage was really going to struggle, because they had not left, they had not kind of separated, and there was 3 there all the time, and just impacted on that marriage, and it was a genuine caring thing that the parents want to do. You know, because they saw the love and they saw the mistake and they wanted to help. Yes, that's lovely. But it's sometimes better to step back, let them stand on their own feet. Be there for them. You don't but not in a way that is going to become an interdependent thing where 3 are in it or 4 in it rather than just the 2.
Yeah. And, you know, I think it is all part of building those healthy family relationships, because we do want those relationships to continue and to flourish and to grow. But everybody needs to know their place within that structure.
Yeah, I know there was one, I think it was Rob Parson talked about a couple, and they had a big party and stuff like that, and she rushed out the door and rushed home, and she arrived at the door at our mother's house, and we had an hour around, I'm leaving them and all this, and she said, no, I'm sorry, you've left now, you've made your choice. And sometimes we have to look at choices. Sometimes we're always afraid not to recognize that we have made choices. And she said, you've left, you must go back. And that girl went back to her husband, and, you know, they worked it out and things like that. But if that mother had let her in, and, you know, kind of, stay here, live here, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where would that marriage be, you know? And that was a hard thing for that mother to do as a person who loves her child. But it might have been the best thing for their marriage.
Yeah, she was wise in her decision, and obviously she could see that this was something that could and should be worked out by the couple themselves. So off you go back and work it out.
Yeah, I remember, and I gave the keys back of my parents' house when we got married. I gave the keys back to my parents as a kind of nearly a symbol that we were leaving and cleaving of, you know, my parents' house. So I didn't have a key for their house for a period of time, because I felt the separation was needed, you know.
Yeah.
And actually, one thing, my parents saw a house very near where Diane and myself had bought our house. And they kind of liked this house, but it was quite close to our house. And you couldn't quite see the doorways, but it was very close. What did I do? And I prayed a lot about that, you know. Is that okay? You know what I mean? But we had only been married about 8 or 9 months.
Yeah.
I went to see the house and everything. And eventually I went to my parents and said, look, Dad and Mum, I'd prefer if you didn't buy that house. And they didn't. And that was a tough one to call, but I just felt we were just setting up our nest, if you like, and we were if we'd been married maybe 5 or 6 years, maybe it might have been okay, but we were just married there a relatively short time, and I think we needed our space in some ways to be our own nest. It was a tough one, that.
Yeah, it sounded like it was a tough one, and there are people who have to make those kind of choices, and I think it is important, as you said, you prayed about it. It is very important that when we have these big decisions to make, that, you know, we can kind of have that assurance that, okay, I'm going to pray about it and just see, you know, how God works through this and give me the wisdom to make the right decision.
Sorry, you're breaking up there a bit, Anna. Sorry about that.
Are you still with us, Anna? I was talking about, you mentioned that you prayed about the whole situation of your parents buying that house, and how it does stand that if we can come before God and pray about those kind of decisions that are hard. Wasn't easy, I would imagine, going to your parents and saying, I'd rather you didn't buy that particular house. Alan, are you with us?
Yeah. With that situation, I had to give it over to the Lord, and It's breaking up a little bit there, Anna. Sorry about that.
Okay.
I'm hearing bits and pieces. But,
Okay. Well, we can hear you
yeah.
quite clearly, so carry on.
All right. Okay. So yeah, I made that one, and to be honest with you, my parents eventually were fine with it and okay when we did that. But it was a healthier thing to do, and you know, my parents were great parents and loving parents and a great example as a couple for marriage and things like that. And they inspire me, so they did, and they grew together and they held hands in later life. And I'm challenged by that in my marriage. But how do we build healthy family relationships? What about resolving conflict? All our relationships involve some sort of conflict. Identify the issue, as I said before, and apologize for it.
Okay.
And then consider their needs. Show gratitude to your parents.
Yeah.
Maintain contact. Take the initiative to telephone them regularly. Talking about boundaries, I remember there's a guy on the Alpha Marriage course that actually talks about his father lived abroad and used to ring them about 6 o'clock in the evening, just as they were about to sit down for dinner. And this started to really infuriate the wife, because just as they were kind of their time together and stuff like that, the father would ring. And so they had to change that a little bit, and he decided, ring me at work at lunchtime and we'll talk then. And that was a kind of a healthy boundary. So look at that kind of healthy way of doing things,
Yeah.
Remember, your first priority is to your husband or wife. And I had a friend whose mother was very strong-willed and would down his wife. And he loved his mother and he loved his wife, and eventually he had to say, sorry, my wife is my priority here. So don't she comes first, and that's our unit now. So it took a little while, but in handling these hard situations, it will help the relationship longer. These healthy boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
So making our own decisions. We're our own decisions. If, say, a close family says something and asks us to do something, Diane, I will say, I'll talk to Diane about it, and we'll come back to you on that, so that Diane and myself make the decision. We don't make any big decisions outside each other. So look at that as well, because sometimes parents can kind of put a lot on you, pressure on you to do something.
Yeah.
But you have to kind of say, no, sorry, I need to talk to my husband or wife, and we'll come back to you on that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of putting in a healthy boundary. So you're making your own decisions together.
Mm-hmm. And what about this situation, Alan? If we look back at our past, and there may be somebody listening today who's dealing with some childhood pain or some unmet childhood needs. Obviously, if we don't deal with these situations, they are going to affect our marriage relationships.
Yeah, recognizing unmet childhood needs, like, don't be surprised if you encounter strong feelings as you do, as you talk about unmet childhood needs. So remember that it's quite emotional in this. So try and be it's coming out. So by coming out, you have to kind of recognize this. So, give God permission to open your heart and express your feelings to him. Give it over to the Lord, give it over to him, and he will help in that healing process. So, but grieve with each other. It says in the Bible, rejoice with those who rejoice, mourn with those who mourn, in Romans 12:15. So allow your husband or wife to talk about what has been lost, and give him or her emotional support. So, as I say, come along beside them, so grieve with them if there has been unmet childhood pain. So receive comfort from your partner, but do not demand it. In other words, be in it together, but it's not a kind of a neediness that's been brought into it. You know what I mean? So don't demand it as if you want it and you demand it, but just grieve together in that. And then forgive. give up any desire to repay. You know what I mean? I want to get them back for all these things. Sometimes you can't do that even, but you have to give up that kind of desire to repay. Give up continuing expectations along of what you have wanted your parents or others to be for you. You know, sometimes you have to give that up, release that. Sometimes you cannot control other people. You can't control their response. You can only control your own response. Remember, forgiveness is an ongoing act of will.
Yeah.
And is essential for healing. So you have to continually do that. Continually do that. Like Corrie ten Boom, you know, forgiving that jailer who killed her sister. So it's a continual process and an act of it, an act of will. Mm-hmm. Look to God and move on. Nothing is beyond God's power to heal and restore. Remember that. Nothing is beyond God's power to heal and restore. Pray for yourself and each other. Ask God to heal the sense of loss and to help to know His love. Dwell on the promise of God in the Bible. God's made so many promises. Believe God's unconditional love for you as you are now. Do not use childhood pain as an excuse for not meeting your partner's needs. You know, sometimes we can focus on the failure. Sometimes when it comes along to situations that we can just stop and just focus on that failure, focus on other people's mistakes, focus on, and not where we're at. We have to kind of recognize where the other people were in it. I remember one time I was on the radio with a lady whose uncle abused her, and she actually let it go, and she even went to his funeral and things like that, and people talked nicely about him and things like that at the funeral. But you know, it was where he was at, and she didn't in some ways let that grip of bitterness eat into her and look on that moment of abuses and stop there. She kind of released it, forgave him, and then moved on. It's not an easy thing to do, and sometimes it can be all-consuming in marriages where there's actually really a lot of hurts. It becomes a crutch. It becomes your whole encompassing of your whole life about this, what this person has done to you and hurt you, and you know, as I said before, forgiveness is not always. It's not really more. It's more about yourself than the other person, and releasing that and giving that forgiveness, and saying, you know, I forgive this person, so that you can move on. It doesn't change what happened in some sense, but it changed the way you look on it.
Yeah. And I suppose, Alan, just in finishing up on this subject, just to maybe encourage people that, you know, your parents may not have had the best marriage. You may not have had the best marriage model to you in your life growing up, but things can be different within your own marriage. You don't have to live by what you've seen in the past.
No, you know, that's the nice thing about it. It's not the situation that makes us how we react to it. How do people who have, you know, had such difficult upbringings, how are they so radiant in grace and love? And, you know, we can be a shining light, even though we've gone through tough times ourselves. We can have great marriages. We can be loved and love. And just because we weren't when we were younger doesn't mean we can't be when we're older. Mm-hmm. But yet we have to recognize the things that have gone in our past and give them over to the Lord, you know, and forgive.
Yeah.
Remember, God forgave us too, you know. We sometimes forget that God forgives our sins, you know, and we have to release it and move on. Like, look at Paul. I talked about Paul last week and how he persecuted the Jews and, you know, murdered and whatever he did to the Jewish people, to the Christians. And but look how he became a Christian himself and how he didn't focus on that failure of how he'd hurt so many people, but he moved on and was a real ambassador for the Christian faith. Mm-hmm. And, you know, we can bring so much, even though maybe in our past have had difficulties, we can bring so many positive things It's not the situation that makes us, but how we react to it and how we can go forward in it and start with a fresh sheet. But the thing about it also is we still have to be real in it. And sometimes I've often thought, why do people who come from a divorced family are more likely to be divorced? It's a tough question, that when they've seen the pain, they've seen the difficulty of their own situation, why are they more likely to get divorced? And sometimes I think they try to maybe go too far to the other way, and like a pendulum swinging, they try to hold it up there in the other direction of being a perfect marriage and perfect, and won't deal with conflict because they saw the conflict of their parents' marriage, but they can't hold it up there, and it's not reality. It's not a thing. So eventually it swings back, and they get the divorce again. So be real in your marriage and be kind of balanced in it, and know that conflict is normal and life can be difficult, and trying to be real in that and not try to be something that it isn't.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a lot that we've looked at in regards to families today, and certainly I think if we can be of an encouragement to anybody who is maybe starting out on their marriage relationship, or any parents who see their children starting out on their marriage relationships, they can see that there's so many blessings in seeing a couple coming together in marriage, and for the families to be behind them 100%, and to let them go, as you said, to let them go and cleave to each other and move on. Now, Alan, of course, next week we're going to be talking about the topic of good sex, which is certainly one that I think has people listening now.
There's no demonstrations or anything like that, I'm afraid, on the radio.
No, we will be encouraging each other. We'll be encouraging our listeners next week to build.
Sure, God created sex,
Mm-hmm.
so and it is a special and beautiful thing, and sometimes we kind of get a bit embarrassed. I'll tell you a little story next week about my dad and myself when it relates to sex, which is a kind of a funny little story.
Yeah, that's it. It does kind of bring embarrassment, but as you said, it's an important part of the marriage relationship, so it is one that we're going to deal with next week. And just before finishing up, Alan, I know we just have about a minute left, but for those who do want more information about the Alpha Marriage course, or indeed about Alpha Ireland, or getting courses running in their church or in their community, how can they do that?
Yeah, look, if you have a heart for marriage,
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you start by getting the Alpha DVD and some books, and yourself and a few other couples get together in your home and actually do the marriage course together.
Mm-hmm.
And when you see that the tool is there and it's user friendly and it's great and it really strengthens your marriage, then maybe go out into your community, go out into your church and say, look, I'd love to do a marriage course to help strengthen marriages in our church, in our community, in our school, even in different areas of society where, because marriage is going through a tough time in Ireland, because, and marriage is difficult, and marriage is there for a long time, and it goes through the ups and downs, and we need to invest in it. We need to service it, as I say, service it like our car. Mm-hmm. We need to make it run smoother and clean the drains out and get it going better. So if you want to do that, get onto the Alpha Ireland or alphacourse.ie site and ask, can you order the DVD and the booklets, and do it in your home first and feel comfortable in it just in your first stage, and then maybe go out into the different areas that you feel there is a need. Mm-hmm. And it's great. It's lovely. When I do the course, and I do it every year, I just love seeing these couples. And sometimes they go through these little argy-bargies as they try to clean the drains, and then move through it, and then you see them blossom in their strength, and they're much together, and they're like the three-legged race I've talked about, where they're walking in sequence together, and it's just lovely. It's like, instead of having this conflict area where there's a bit of edginess to the relationship, they're just so in tune with each other, and that's lovely. So that's why I'm passionate about it, seeing those married couples get stronger together.
Yeah, it's great. That's what it's all about. And Alan, I just want to thank you again for being with us today, and we look forward to having you back with us here on The Level this time next week.
Thanks, Anna.
Alan, thank you so much. Bye-bye.